Remember to do the Strawpoll that is in the description for the September the 12th meetup in Amsterdam. Everybody knows that I love anarcho-capitalists. They're like the anti-vaxxers of the economics world. One of their favorite tales in the genre of evils of government is about a man called Benjamin Franklin. You might have heard of him for his nefarious deed of establishing a monopoly for the United States Postal Office. Basically, as the story goes, Benjamin Franklin, who was the Postmaster General of the US Postal Department, as it was still called back then, an organization which had contributed massively to the revolution against the English because it, allowed for information delivery that wasn't controlled by the English crown, Benjamin Franklin saw a problem happening with that department. Several independent postal services run by private individuals, just, small corporations that were delivering the mail better and faster and cheaper than the government. So Benjamin Franklin made them essentially illegal by making the US Postal Department the only people allowed to deliver first-class mail. Because he likes the government and he wanted more government. Aside from the fact that the story just sort of isn't entirely true, it's not entirely untrue also, but it's primarily not entirely true, let's all just sit down and have a basic lesson in how profit incentives work. Imagine you are a private postal service, and as such, your reason to exist as a company, your job, your stated goal is to generate the maximum possible amount of profit for your shareholders. Now, you operate inside of a specific town because this is like a boiled down, simplified example. And here, in this part of the town, there's all the houses. But way over here, let's call this the Dune House, there is a single house also. Now, whenever there's mail to be delivered to the Dune House, over here, the postman takes an hour to go from his route in the part of town where people live to go here and deliver the mail, and then he needs another hour to go back to town. So that's 2 extra hours that you need to pay the postman for, only so he can deliver one single piece of mail to this house. And the piece of mail that you deliver to this house is not going to cover those 2 hours of work. As it stands, delivering mail to this single individual house in this town is not a profitable thing to do. And so, as a company whose primary goal is to provide profits for its shareholders, it's not something you should be doing. If you want to make it profitable, you have 2 options. You either charge people the cost of having the postman be walking around for 2 hours to deliver mail to this particular house over here, or you just don't deliver mail to this particular house over here. So now you have a situation where people who live here out in the country do not have the same access to post delivery as people who live here in densely populated areas. Because that's just how the profit incentive works. They either don't get the mail, or it's way more expensive for them to get the mail, and for the sole reason that they live out in the country. And maybe they have very good reasons to live out in the country. Maybe they're farmers, can't do a lot of farming in the city. Maybe they're poor and they can't actually afford to move to the city. Or maybe they just like their freedom and want to live wherever they damn well please. There is, of course, a third option, which isn't as optimal profit-wise, but it's a compromise. You just raise the prices on everyone in town to cover this single house over here. But then a rival company could just go into town and have only the town covered, not covering this single individual house, and they would be able to offer cheaper rates and outcompete you. So now you have Benjamin Franklin, who sees this problem before it arises, because everyone with an understanding of basic economics sees this problem before it arises, and he goes, well, so like the thing is, right, we kind of want all Americans to be able to get the mail, and like to get it at a fair price, because it's pretty essential to keep everyone like having access to sort of communication type things. That's a pretty important advantage as a country to have in it. And that is exactly what government services are for. You provide these services for the sake of providing these services, and not for the sake of generating the maximum amount of profit. Now, what you could do, obviously, is you could have private companies deliver the mail to all the areas where it's profitable to deliver the mail, and then use your government-run mail company to pick up the slack. But that would essentially amount to allowing the private sector to make profit wherever there's profit to be made, and then wherever there isn't profit to be made, the taxpayer needs to pick up the tab. Whereas if you have like a national post company that has a state-enforced monopoly, you can still operate it at a profit. Just not as much of a profit as if it had been a private company that was focused solely on actually making a profit. And even if you don't make a profit, the areas where it is profitable to deliver the mail offset the losses that you make in the areas where it's not. Because, I don't know, maybe say theoretically you're in a huge country that is just fucking gigantic and has wildlands as far as the eye could see. And there's like sometimes a person living in them. And this principle can be extrapolated to a lot of other services, primarily the ones we call infrastructure. There are certain services that we consider essential for a nation to function on a high level, where the problem is that the profit incentive doesn't line up with the interests of every single individual citizen. In the past couple decades, we've seen widespread privatization of a lot of these services in the Western world, and the results have been pretty shit. In Germany, we have two cases of this happening. You know how people around the world, when someone's like really punctual, they joke about how they're as punctual as a German train? In Germany, we also have this joke. It just works the other way around. Whenever someone is late all of the time, we compare them to the Deutsche Bahn. Because over the course of the past 20 odd years, the Deutsche Bahn has become pretty shit. Trains are slow, dirty, almost never on time, and way more expensive than they've ever been. A lot of lines have been closed down, very few new lines have opened up, and those not really servicing areas that most desperately need them. Tracks have fallen into disrepair, all kinds of shit. Coincidentally, this is also the time during which the Deutsche Bahn has been a private company. Now, the main shareholder is still the German government, but the thing is, the company's stated objective is no longer to provide good and reliable rail coverage and access to public transportation to all Germans, but to generate a maximum amount of profit. And as it turns out, providing good and reliable rail coverage and access to public transportation to all Germans is not a profitable endeavor. And you see this with railway privatizations all over the world. Really, the only one where that's actually worked and the quality of service and coverage has increased is Japan. But as it turns out, the Japanese private railway system is actually very tightly regulated and gets a huge amount of subsidies from the government for all the unprofitable parts. So the Japanese taxpayer is picking up the tab for the failings of private industry. The second example here in Germany is the internet. A lot of people don't know this, but the internet is very bad in Germany, especially if you live anywhere that is even remotely approaching the countryside. There's genuinely still people with dial-up modems within the border of this federal republic, and not by choice. This is because the German government, through a German government agency, built the initial infrastructure for the internet, and then they gave it to a private company and said, you're gonna do the thing, right? You're gonna maintain this and upgrade it, and also allow other people competition on your network. That's very important that you do all these things. And the telecom, which you Americans might know better by its alternate incarnation T-Mobile, said, yeah, we're totally gonna do that. Trust us, mate. We're really we're gonna do the fuck out of that. Contrast this with the country that has the fastest internet speeds in the world by far, South Korea. They have one government-backed ISP that runs the networks, builds the networks, operates the networks, and it's fairly cheap, and it's super fast, and it doesn't exist explicitly only to make a profit. This isn't to say that it's impossible to have these kinds of services be provided by private, profit-oriented entities, and also have this done in a way where the taxpayer doesn't have to pick up the tab wherever that private industry fails. Sweden does this with its internet, and it has the second fastest internet in the whole world. And this is a country that consists mostly of boondocks. Seriously, you can be in the Arctic Circle 100 kilometers away from like the next person in your small house, and you get faster internet than you do in some German or American cities downtown. But that requires good and effective regulations, and if there's one thing that profit-oriented companies, especially American ones, just really hate, it's good and effective regulation. Because when you have good and effective regulation, you can't make the absolute maximum amount of profit that you could be making, even though you are still making a profit, and you can't even blame the government for the bad service that you're providing, because you can't provide a bad service. You have to provide a good service as per the regulations. And that's why you have to pay your representatives to stack the agencies that control these regulations with people who will make bad regulations. Why do you think the NHS has as many problems as it does? Now, there might be a few people down here watching this video saying, well, if you choose to live way out here, then that was your choice, and you deserve to have to pay more for this service to happen to you. And if you can't afford it, well, then you don't deserve it. And I can respect that sort of die-hard AnCap attitude. I don't agree with it in the slightest, but I can at least respect it. It's very alpha. But don't then turn around and say, oh yeah, private industry could just provide all these services to just the same extent as the government could, but also cheaper, because it's just factually not true. Your measure of success includes the people in the Dune house not getting their mail. If these people don't get their mail, that to you is a higher degree of success, because they do not do what the market wants them to do. You're a cuck to daddy profit incentive. You are very invested into praying to the god of the invisible hand. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't pretend like it isn't the case. Oh, and before you start typing like an angry screed about the existence of UPS and DHL and FedEx and how that proves that I'm actually totally wrong, you mean the delivery companies that deliver parcels where their drastically underpaid workers have to put in super long shifts and very often barely have the time to throw your parcel into the general direction of your home if they want to stand even a remote chance of getting home that day? Yeah, that's wow, super great that the profit incentive would do that. It's totally not, shifting the burden of the system's failings onto the workers within that system. And also, by extension, the taxpayer that has to pay for the things that these people cannot afford for themselves, because there's a lot of people with full-time employment that need social services. Yeah, fucking great business model there, mate. Fucking rock on. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. The book, it may not be coming out tomorrow. I had the Amazon sent me an email and said, hey, would you please adjust the trim and give it more space at the edges? Because even though we sent you a template that you were supposed to use in Photoshop, it turns out that template doesn't necessarily sort of line up with reality, and it can take up to 72 hours for them to make it happen. But I will put out a video the moment it's released. It might come out tomorrow. I did the thing this morning. In that spirit, consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar if you feel like it, or buying some of this beautiful first-class merchandise that could be delivered to you through a delivery company of your choice because it's not a parcel, or maybe you don't live in the United States. Actually, it is a parcel, it's not first-class mail, that's what I meant to say. And in that spirit, maybe AnCaps, stop lying. Come out of the closet. Admit that you really like to be pegged by big corporations with leather strap-ons. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there is a lot wrong with that. I personally just don't like it. I think that there's nothing wrong with you liking it, if that's your thing. It's just that me and the overwhelming majority of people in the world don't share your particular fetish, it turns out. And see you around, cunts.